Hey everybody, welcome to episode 70 of the Is That Normal podcast. And today we're going to talk about boomerangs.
Yes. So have you ever tried boomerang?
I
Randall?
have. It did not go well.
It did not go well. So this is really funny. It's one of those like vivid childhood memories for me, just certain things that stand out.
Yes.
So I was young, like probably 6, 7, somewhere in there, and I watched some TV show, and it was like one of those like crime drama type of shows, and there was somebody who had been killed with a boomerang that had like a knife edge on it. Like they found this body on a beach, and it had been killed with this like metal blade edged boomerang. And I thought, that's the coolest thing ever. I need a boomerang, of course. And I told my parents I need a boomerang. Of course, as good parents, they got me one, right? But It didn't have the metal edge on it. I'm not sure. I talked about maybe kind of filing that down, but anyway. But so I just thought, man, I'm just gonna go out there. I'm just gonna do this, and it's gonna be great. And I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours throwing that thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever once
There's
got
definitely a
to come
technique
back.
to it that...
Landed on the roof of my house before. I probably did hit my sister with it, but not because it was coming back at me. So it's just...
Was it like a wooden?
Yeah, it was
or
wooden.
Like,
It was a
so
wooden...
Yeah, like that's like a legit...
I had a legit
boomerang.
wooden boomerang.
That's fantastic.
It was pretty great.
That's fantastic. Well, I don't think... We might have had some... I think we had some... They made like a kid's like plastic version, and we had some of those.
I remember those.
Still kind of the same result.
Yeah.
Again... It probably hit some siblings in the process.
Right.
May or may not have been intentional, but but never could get it to come back to me.
And it was, I think, Randall, I remember, like, for me, growing up in, like, the 80s and early 90s, like having cool toy weaponry, it was kind of a big deal. Like,
it was.
Yeah. I had a throwing star, and I bought some nunchucks. I mean, there's just, like, the culture we lived in back
nunchucks, then. Yes. Of course, I was a huge Ninja Turtles fan, so nunchucks were awesome. And then, every stick I had large sticks. You were Donatello, right?
Yeah, bow staff skills.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but for us, probably our most commonly used weapon between me and my brother were actually Hot Wheels, which, when you're accurate, they can do a lot of damage.
I can imagine.
So
They've got some sharp edges on them.
I have been hit by more than my fair share of Hot Wheels.
Did you ever throw a Hot Wheels and it came back at you?
Yes, but it was just because my brother was throwing it back at me. So kind of the same effect, maybe.
That's
but
right.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about a different kind of boomerang, and while I could never get that wooden boomerang to come back, we're going to talk about boomerangs that maybe parents don't really want back. But what is it? What happens when you like launch your children, and then as adults they wind up coming back?
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about that today and what to do if and when that happens.
Well, as we said, welcome to the Is That Normal podcast, and we do podcasts every other Tuesday here, but we have lots of other great ways to connect with us. We have a Facebook page, we have Instagram, YouTube, and then we have our website, isthatnormal.org, that you can check out. You can email us at connect@isthatnormal.org, and just check out, we're posting supplementary content throughout the week, just things that maybe go along with some of our other podcast
highlighting
clips
resources too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of our big hearts is to equip parents, and I just know for me, the more tools I have in my toolbox, the better. So we try to really get stuff like that out there as often as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we would love to hear from you, questions, comments. We just would love to interact with you. So again, that email address is connect@isthatnormal.org, or you can do that through any of those channels. And
I can just imagine that it says that right down there if you're watching it on YouTube.
The magic of
it's just right there.
Video editing.
Yeah. So Randall, so one of the things we talk about often is that we want to help parents lead their children, towards faith, and then also to be functioning humans. That's one of our goals.
Yes.
And so when you have adult children and you find yourself in a place where they are needing to or wanting to ask to move back home, it can feel like kind of a letdown, a moment of like, did I mess up, or a moment of frustration, like what's wrong with you? But but we're seeing that that's happening more and more frequently.
Yeah. So how common is it for adult children to move back home?
I was doing some research just this week getting ready for this podcast, and there's quite a bit of data on this, actually, especially over the last year. They've really been looking at this. But as far back as 2014, they pinpointed 2014, Pew Research particularly is one has done this, that was the moment where living with a parent became the most common living arrangement for an 18 to 34-year-old person. Wow. So the majority, that means over 50% of 18 to 34-year-olds were living with a parent as of 2014. Wow. And then you look at, in 2018, they found out that about 25 million in that age group are living with a parent or another family member that's of a different generation than them. And then again, this kind of got really highlighted this last year because during the pandemic, they saw another spike in this. Yeah. Just with a variety of factors, schools closing, jobs falling apart, just those kind of things happening. They saw about 2.9 million young adults between March and May of 2020 moved in with a parent, and so this is just it's a thing that's happening for a lot of people.
Yeah. So we kind of highlighted some of the especially the pandemic, things like that. But what are some other reasons why that may be happening?
It feels like in our culture, and there's just maybe sometimes it's stated, sometimes it's unstated. This feeling of like, oh, you had to move home with mommy, like. You must be irresponsible and lazy, and I'm sure maybe there are some of those kids out there where that's the truth, but I think there's a lot more factors that we need to consider. I actually just got done reading a book called "Can't Even: How Millennials Became the Burnout Generation," written by a researcher and a journalist, and who is also a millennial, and it really helped me to get a different perspective on this. And she really went back and highlighted a lot of things that have happened in the last 50, 60 years in our country that has changed the job market and the economic structure of things. I was raised by a generation that, had stable jobs that you tended to work out for, 20, 30 years, had good benefits, had a pension, good retirement, all of these things. And that is just becoming not what exists anymore. Those structures are no longer the same. You also have this increasing educational bubble that's happening, that more and more jobs that used to you had to maybe have a 4-year degree to do, now is at least a master's degree. You probably need a specialist, maybe you need a doctorate. So instead of 4 years of post high school, you're talking maybe 8 or 10 years of post high school, and it costs 10 times as much to go to school as it did 20, 30 years ago. And so and then they get these jobs, and the job market is so competitive. The recession at the end of the 2000s there, 2007, 2008, just really kind of decimated some of those entry-level job markets for people, and that's really not bounced back. And so there's a lot of other factors going on that's causing kids to go out. They're heading towards a career and a degree, and yet they get out there and it's not there, and they wind up back at working at minimum wage jobs. They can't make it on their own. And so a lot of that is happening. And then there's also, and this is interesting, and they really looked at this during the pandemic, just the need for multi-generational interdependence. That it's not just the young people that have a need. A lot of times it's the whole family can't make it on their own, and so collectively we are better than we were apart. There's this concept called economic precarity that is becoming more and more the norm, that we live in a society where even middle class people are just one small crisis away from not being able to pay the bills this month. And so a lot of things going on.
And really that in a lot of ways, it may look slightly different today, but that goes back. We had a few episodes ago, we talked about the nuclear family and kind of how that's changed. And, this, in a lot of ways, if you go back 100 years or more, that's, it may have looked a little different, but families tended to stay together and help support each other multiple generations.
One of the things, reading some of the research, talking about specific situations of young people in their 20s who are trying to figure out what to do. And, a lot of times the advice they get is like, try harder, move, get a different job. But what a lot of young people are starting to say is, well, but my family is here, and the church I'm plugged into is here, and this is the community I'm a part of, and maybe I could go somewhere else and make more money, but there's other values that are good values that hold me here, but are making me need to be more dependent on other generations.
So we know, the benchmark has changed as far as what leaving the nest looks like, for a variety of factors, of which, we've just discussed several of those. But, we also probably don't want our 40-year-old children, sleeping in their childhood bunk bed until noon and getting up and saying, "Hey, Mom, what's for breakfast?" So that's probably not the ideal scenario. So what are some things, parents can do to maybe help navigate an older child that's still living or maybe has moved back home, and kind of what that looks like, and, how do you move from that to maybe that next transitional phase?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we think about at our house a lot is, as our kids get to be adult age, which I've got 2 adult children now who are not boomerang children. They're just not left yet. They're still at home. They're young adults, but they're still at home. But as we've thought about that, is our role as parent is changing. We're no longer there to tell them everything to do, to hold their hand, but we do want to be a resource, offer them perspective, but then also healthy boundaries to push them to those next steps. And so one of the things that we've looked at often here on the podcast is some resources from Fuller Youth Institute, and they've written several books, and one of those is Growing With, which talks a lot about those different age stages. Has helped me and my wife immensely in our perspective on those things. But in there, they share 7 questions to ask if you've got a boomerang child or maybe a young adult at your home who's not launched yet, just to help navigate that. And so the first question is do you have a plan?
And that's huge.
That's huge, And I mean, and I know for me, I got out of high school and I had a plan. I had a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
That none of it almost came to fruition, but I had a direction, and that's the thing with our kids. We understand your plan may change,
right?
But you need to have a plan. Like, what are you gonna do next? What are we moving towards? And
maybe
I like
something other than waiting for my rock band to hit it big, or
right. Yeah, how's that working out for you? Right? And so I know we've asked that. Or said it this way, is like, I'm comfortable with you staying at home to a certain point, and we'll talk about that in the next question, but as long as you're moving towards a career or a direction. And I know one thing that we've been talking about a lot with not just our kids, but other young people, there's jobs out there that you need to go get a 4-year degree or a post-grad degree, but it's expensive to do that today.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure that that's where you're going, or what you don't have a specific goal in mind, there may be some different options you should look at. And skilled labor jobs are in great demand right now. You can often go for just months rather than years to get some sort of training and get in a job. And so
and a lot of them pay as well better. As or better than a lot of jobs that require
we were just
4-year
looking
degree.
So my son is in a skilled labor degree path. My younger son, who's just 12, he's got this idea of what he wants to be, and we were looking at the type of jobs that degree that he would have to go for 6 years to school to get would get him. And my son's starting pay on his skilled labor job, my older son, is more than the top pay of this. So those are things to consider.
Absolutely.
Really. And so we want to help them have a plan, and a realistic plan that they can work. And then the second question is there an end date? Like when is this going to end, right? Is there an age? Is there a life goal that's going to happen? Right. And I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I know for our kids, and it's probably going to be different for each one of my children, but my oldest right now, we kind of said, hey, 22 is a really good, as long as you're moving in a schooling path or a degree path, and still getting training, I'm good to do that till 22. Yeah. And then we need to reevaluate, like how are our goals going? Those kind of things.
Absolutely.
Or, if they have to come back for various reasons, like, okay, but what are our benchmarks that we're going to get to so we know that we're heading towards a different arrangement? So I think that's a good question. Another one is what is your financial contribution going to be?
Yeah.
No, there's no free meal tickets in life, and if we really want to help our kids make the next best decision to get towards where they want to be, we need to incrementally help them make choices now. And so
Right.
part of that is how are you budgeting? How are you, how are you contributing? How are you taking responsibility for yourself? And so I think that's a really important question to work through. And again, there's not a particular algorithm to tell you. I know in my house, there's certain bills that my older children have been paying for themselves since before they graduate high school. And then we add some more bills. And there was a year my son wasn't going to school. And so he paid me a set amount every month because he was only working. And so he needed to be a part of financially contributing if he was working a full-time job. And so that's a good question. Another one is what will be your household responsibilities? And that's a challenging one.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of times when they're in that stage, they're working, going to school, they got their own social life, they're especially if they've moved out and lived on their own, coming back. And so then coming back and saying, it's your turn to do the dishes. That's a little different than when they were, 12, 13, 14, 15 in your house. But I think they have to see, hey, if I'm allowing you to live here, you've got to contribute. And there has to be some guidelines and boundaries there for that. Do they need to communicate to you when they'll be out for dinner or coming home after a certain hour? This has been one of the toughest ones for my older kids to get.
Yeah.
Because they're like, but I'm 18. I can do what I want. Or I'm 19 or whatever. I can do what I want. And then you know what I tell them? I say, I'm 45 and I still tell the other people in my house where I'm going to be and when I'm going to be home. Like that's just good humaning.
Yes.
Like whoever you're going to live with, you owe them the courtesy to communicate what's going on in your life so you can do life. And so, we don't care if you need to be out, to do this or that, but we need to know. We need to know what to prepare for. Should we make you dinner? Should we lock the door? If you come, if it's 2 a.m, I hear wrestling, I'm coming out, with guns blazing because I don't know who you are. So what's going on here? And so, we got to have that. And if you don't have that talk, guess what? You're going to be frustrated. They're going to be frustrated. It's not going to work out well. You just got to have that talk up front.
And I've seen that, especially in scenarios where maybe somebody they've left and they've been on their own, where they're not having to communicate that to somebody and then to come back home but the scenario change, as you said, there's other people in the household and other people you have to think of, and it's not necessarily, that communication is not necessarily for the same exact reasons it was when, maybe your child is 16 or 17 years old. It's more of a courtesy. It's more of a, hey, there are multiple people that live in this house together, and so we've all got to make sure that
this works.
We can, absolutely.
We can live in the same space, and if a child, especially if they've moved out and come back, there's probably all these emotional things they're dealing with, and you as a parent deal with emotional things, and again, you just got to be pretty intentional about having conversations, but they're going to feel like it's a mistrust.
Yes.
And we've just really tried to explain this part of this is not necessarily about trust. And this is also not a punishment. This is learning how to live in harmony with other people, which is something you're going to probably have to do the rest of your life. And so this is training for the future, as we do this. So, And then the last question is what are their boundaries about other issues? Again, if they're an adult, they've got different rights, different responsibilities, different types of relationships. So what does them having a romantic partner, friend, look like at your house? Like what's the goal or the guidelines and the rules there? And, things that if they're 21, they've got choices about drinking and smoking and, these things that's and they're adult and they have to make their own choices about those things, but it's your house and you need to make, and especially for us, we've got younger kids in our house, what media content is being used and, what just our life habits are do we all sit down for dinner? Does that mean you're exempt? Well, what does that show to the other people living in the house if they are expected something different than you? And so we you just gotta intentionally think through all the possible things and try to have those conversations up front as much as possible.
And I think you hit on something big. Is I think, I even know of examples of where that conversation didn't happen until after there were issues, and then it becomes infinitely harder to navigate that without people's feelings and emotions getting heavily involved, and so it's, I think, in having that conversation right up front and asking these questions, and everybody kind of going into this, with an equal understanding of kind of what the expectations are and what that's going to look like, I think is a huge benefit for everybody involved.
I do as well. Yeah.
So how can we make this a period of blessing and not a burden?
Yeah. This may not be the ideal. This may not be what you expected, but it can be another great opportunity, I think, for us to be an influence in our children's lives. Like we've been talking about, clear communication is just utmost importance. Yeah. Like you got to make sure you're doing it ahead, do it intentional, sitting down with a very clear list with them and just saying, hey, here's some of the things that we need to hammer out. I think that's just super important. If you don't do that, you're setting yourself and them up for failure, and hurt feelings and not a positive relational outcome. And that's the other part of it, is we have to remember the goal. Our goal is, we want them, I think, first and foremost, we want them growing to trust the Lord and to ask Him to lead their life. And then as we do that, we hopefully that they're making wise decisions based on truth, and that's where we want to go. But man, we want to continue to be available to help them on that journey. They're not done yet. They're not there yet. We don't want them to feel like that we can't still be a resource for them. And so I think we just have to remember that goal is out there, and whatever speed they're progressing on that journey, we just want to help them make the next best step. And the researchers are saying that 28 is the new 18, and that's terrible, and we can be frustrated and feel about it however we want. I don't think it's all their fault. I think culture has changed, and
we've talked about in some earlier episodes just the fact that as our culture and as just as what our lives now look like, as opposed to many years ago when by the age of 15 or 16 a lot of young people have had significant life experiences and maybe done things and experienced things that had them much more prepared for what adulthood looked like than what they have now. And that's really just a product of
it's just different
the way, exactly. And so there may be there may be true issues there as far as there may be some blame or whatever you want to call it, to be sure, but there are also a lot of other extenuating factors, and like I said, we've just alluded to that in some earlier episodes, as far as the development of
God is always willing to work redemptively with me, and I want to follow that example with my kids. I mean, there's consequences, there's times where you have to have tough love, but I want to try to work redemptively, and I think that's the message at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is good stuff, and this is something I think there are many families that have dealt with some form of this in one way or another, just because of the nature of the
and
way
even
things
if
are.
your kids aren't at that point yet, or that's not your story, it's good to think through these things, because it could still happen.
Yeah.
And you'd want to be ahead of thinking through how are you going to handle it if it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up today, our two takeaways. The first is just to maybe consider rethinking your position on the boomerang generation, and kind of what that looks like, and maybe what drives that, and taking a different look at that. And then the second is just to connect with us and let us know, hopefully something that we shared that maybe helped you, or something that you found interesting. And we mentioned earlier all the ways that you can connect with us, and we encourage you to do that. All right, ready?
Be abnormal.